It's not anything to be ashamed of to say, well, it kind of looks like that structure's worked quite well for the entire duration of mankind, and so maybe we mess with it at our peril.
You're hearing about family values from the childless and unmarried. Don't follow them.
The women have to stop blaming men for their sense of malaise or misery.
I didn't create you people to kill and torture and rape each other. I created you to be good to each other. I love the God who had a flood.
Alright, so I wanted to do just a little video about an observation that I've made over the past 30 or so years, from about the 1990s, the 2000 era to today. And that this isn't really a condemnation or an affirmation of white pride. This is more of an observation of how that phenomena has really shifted. And I'm not talking about white pride in the sense of ethno-nationalism. I'm talking about white pride in the sense of white people themselves caring and viewing themselves. So I would need to get that clear right off the start. This isn't about Ku Klux Klan rallies. This is more of how white people in general have viewed themselves from that time, from about the 1990s, 2000s to today, and how that has shifted. I'm going to start off by saying that even, because I grew up in California. I grew up 20 minutes east of East LA. And even then, there was a subconscious pressure to not want to identify as white. There was a pressure to be anything but the nerdy white kid in class. There was definitely a sense that you were to blame for everyone's ills. And the neighborhood I grew up in was predominantly Hispanic. There were a few blacks, a few whites, a few Asians, but it was predominantly Hispanic. Now, that having been said, another dynamic you have to understand about my perspective on this is I grew up in a traditional Italian household. We had our own, how would you say, our own catchphrases, our own cuisine, our own traditions and recipes that we still pass down to our children, and we do take incredible pride in our heritage as Italians. And that's a constant theme throughout my childhood, and also something that I give to my children, because it's part of who we are. You don't question it. That's just a part of what makes us us. But onwards and onwards. I noticed in my class that when the other kids, who are predominantly Hispanic again, would point me out as a white kid, I found it very strange. Because I'd look at the other white kids and I knew something was different between me and them. And I identified it quickly as I thought of myself as Italian. I thought of myself as something other than what these kids who had no other culture. They had no roots other than what you would call Americana. The Americana was all they had. That was their bread and butter. As far as I was concerned, their cuisine consisted of hot dogs, hamburgers, and whatever else they cooked up on St. Patrick's Day. That's all I knew about their culture and whatever they had to associate with. And I knew I wasn't that. and I knew it. I knew it even subconsciously as a youth that this must have been like middle school, like 8th or ninth grade. No, 8th or 7th grade. Ninth grade is high school. So obviously my classmates are like, "You're a white dude," and I'd say, "No, I'm Italian." And of course, because we're kids and because we have not yet hit peak PC, you know, I have the skin tone of a white guy. Because I'm Italian, I'm of the Northern European stock, and the other half of me is Swedish. So, yeah, I look like a white dude. Surprise, surprise. And they point to my skin color and go, "Dude, you're white." And like, and then they point to the other kids, some of whom, couldn't get a tan for the life of them. Ironically, the half of me that tans is not the Italian, it's the Swedish. The Swedes can tan. Little did you know. But anyways, I'm looking at these other kids who cannot get the golden summer glow that they would burn to a crisp out if they were out in the sun for more than half an hour. And, being a kid, I just looked and said, "Those aren't white people. Those are clear queers." And to me, it was funny, and all of my buddies laughed at the time because they knew who I was. They knew I was Italian, and we knew that there was something else at play here as far as I was personally concerned. And my issue is, I regret that. I actually really and truly regret that because there is this notion that, how do you say it? Well, before I get into that notion, let's suffice to say, I regret that line of thought because what I didn't know I was playing into was the idea that Americana or Americanism was something that should be aspired to rather than denigrated as bland and obsolete. And what happened instead is these people who, like my friends in grade school, what ended up happening is instead of embracing Americanism because of this, toxic anti-American culture and rhetoric, is they decided to go back into their heritage and their family and their genealogy and find their roots. Am I German? Am I Slavic? Am I Russian? Am I Norse? Am I Celtic? And white people as a whole, because of this toxic anti-American culture that was deeply rooted in California, even back then, really, you would see a lot more of white individuals doing things like the Renaissance Fair, trying to make, you know, crafts for their own homeland that their parents and their great-grandparents haven't been to for up to at least 4 generations. And that's at least 4 generations. These are American kids trying to rediscover their non-American roots because being American just didn't cut it anymore. And that's where we're at now. And the reason why we're there now is because of the same gut instinct I had as a child back in middle school. And here's my dilemma. I'm not sure that's a good thing. I am not entirely certain that it was a good thing for me or for these kids to be under the impression that being an American was somehow lesser than being part of a minority group. That's the trick that they pulled over our eyes. That was that was the core motivation, is if you're not part of some other group other than American, then you can't, you have no leverage in society. You have no, you have no meaning. You have no place. You're just, you're just part of the faceless mass. And that was uncool. It was unacceptable. And here's what goes along with that. This is what I was going to get to before. There is a belief, a practice, it's a trope among minorities who come into this country, and it doesn't matter which minority you are. It doesn't matter if you're Vietnamese, Filipino, Mexican, Indian. It doesn't matter if you're Japanese, Chinese. Uh, it doesn't matter which minority. It happens to all of them. There is a notion that when you come into the country, that when you come into America, that you cling to your culture because as a culture and as a family, you know how to take care of one another. And the unspoken criticism of that practice is that you would be incapable of caring for one another as Americans. And in today's society, that seems to be true. It seems to be the case that being an American means to be selfish, greedy, capitalistic, solely capitalistic to the point of detriment to your family and to your extended family, most certainly, that you kind of leave them behind. And what I have to say about that is that's not true. It's not true. It certainly isn't true at all. At the peak of what I would call Americanism was around the 1950s era, and somewhat before that in the 1940s. And this was in response to the Great Depression, where Americans had to take care of one another. They had to be what's the phrase for it? It's not just being frugal. It's not just being frugal. It's being creative, being prudent, being my gosh, the word is escaping me. But there was a sense of banding together, saving your cans, saving whatever you had, because the Great Depression forced us to have to bond together and take care of one another. And in the 1950s, there was a distinct American culture where individuals and families reached out to one another and took care of one another as an American culture. So there's this strong false narrative from outside influences, from outside cultures, who are afraid of Americanism because they feel like Americanism will not just be the death of them, it'll be the death of their ability to care for one another. And that fear has been seized upon by the media and shamefully, by intelligentsia, by colleges, by the academic sphere. There was a false narrative that pushed the idea that Americanism could not take care of the culture at large, that it left people out on their own. And all cultures do that to some extent anyway. But there was a distinct American culture where we still took care of our own despite being distinctly American. And on one hand, given the current state that we're in regards to PC culture, I'm very glad that my friends have decided to go back and discover their roots. I'm extremely glad that they've found something, despite the PC madness, to find pride in again. And that's something that every human needs. They need validation, they need connection, they need that thing that makes them uniquely them. And I don't care if it means if it means embracing your Norse ancestry, if it means embracing your Slavic ancestry, whatever ancestry it is, if that's a part of you and it gives you meaning to embrace that history, go for it. That should be a part of you, no doubt. But I really mourn the fact that the wool has been pulled over our eyes and that Americanism has been denigrated. And what's disturbing is that our media looks at this entire phenomena and puts it under the umbrella of quote-unquote white pride. It's not really white pride. It's not white pride at all. It's individuals fighting for meaning. I would say existence, but we're not really fighting for that either. We're fighting for meaning. And that's the great travesty, is we are the majority of the country. The founding fathers were white men. They get that right. And yet, the vast majority of us have been suckered into believing that we're the ones who need to fight for our meaning in our own country. And I don't know where to pick up the pieces from that goddamn mess, to be perfectly honest. But I did need to get off my chest this little incident as a middle schooler. This recognition that they had already begun to guilt us all into believing that being American wasn't enough. And I just needed to mull over those thoughts with you and to let you know that it's been at work for a while now. And I would like to see that new American ethic rise again. Because that's something else that I'm seeing rise again. Being American, being proud, saying that you're proud to be an American in this country is also on the rise. And I'm glad to see it. I'm just a little shocked at the meandering ways that we've had to find ourselves to get there. It seems like almost we had to break away and rediscover ourselves in order to recognize what it means to be proud Americans again. Because, and here's why I think we do it. This is just a thought, and I'm just rambling at this point, but here's my thought. Maybe our ability to reclaim being American is made possible because we're also recognizing ourselves as something other than simply being a mass of white people. It's easier for a white individual to identify and say, I am of German ancestry and I am an American. Because, and the reason why we do this, the only reason we do it is because we've been told that being American alone is not enough. And we did it as a form of fighting against or pushing back against this narrative that you're just another white face, you're just another oppressor, you're just another individual who is unsavory and unworthy of representation was the impression that I got. And I just wanted to know what your guys' thoughts on this, because this is just through my own life's lens, watching this all unfold. And I'm interested to see where it takes us next, because it could go either really good and unite us as a nation, or it can go very badly. It can go very, very badly. It would make us, it could go so badly that we become no better than the moronic and divisive tactics of the left. And that's all I got, guys. Stay carnal. Bye.